let's talk long-term athletic development. So if you're a parent or if you're a youth athlete seeing this, or just an athlete in general, and you're wanting to know what does it look like for myself or for my child to train, to develop, and to do it in a smart way, then you're in the right place. And the reason this is important is because in today's world of youth sports, we are riddled with gurus and people who think that early specialization is the best way to be able to get to where athletes want to go or to be able to get to the highest level. And what we're seeing is extreme cases of overuse injuries in athletes that are way too young to be getting overuse injuries, as well as burned out kids who don't want to play their sport anymore. And so if this is something that you're trying to avoid as a parent, then you're in the right place, and I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today. So long-term athletic development. So we've got LTAD, long-term athletic development. That's what we're talking about, and that's what I want to go through. And so what does LTAD mean, right? It's really just the idea is that we see specific stages of athletic development as kids grow up and as they mature, right? So we're not training a 7-year-old in the same way as we're training an 18-year-old. Everyone kind of understands that, right? It makes sense in our minds that we're saying, yes, of course, I'm not training a 7-year-old the same way I'm training an 18-year-old, but we don't act that way, right? In the way that we are developing athletes, in the way that amount of volume that we're putting on the field, the amount of things and stress that we're putting on athletes that are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, we aren't treating them that much differently when it comes to volume as we are as an 18, 19, 20-year-old who's a lot more developed and a lot more ready to handle that volume. And so we want to kind of just talk about what do those stages look like and how can we better prepare youth athletes to be able to have long, successful, enjoyable careers and not get burned out and hurt by the time they're 14, 15, 16. 3 main things we want to kind of remember of mistakes that we're trying to avoid. So number 1 is the early specialization. Our goal isn't to specialize early, right? Like a lot of times we think the sooner that I can specialize, the sooner that my kid's going to be able to start really honing in on their craft. But what we actually see, and I can pull up the more specific research that talks about this, but what we see is that early specialization actually doesn't lead to longer, more successful careers, but we actually see the people with the longest careers are the ones who actually had a wider range and specialized later in life, right? So early specialization actually isn't going to be something that's helpful. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that we don't want to train our youth athletes like adults, right? So mistake number 2 is training like adults or / older kids. So we also aren't trying to train them like they're elite athletes, right? Like they're, high school, juniors, seniors, college, freshmen, sophomores. We aren't trying to train our 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds in the same way that we're training and same way that we're competing with athletes that are at the younger or at the older stages of life, because ultimately they're not the same, right? One is developing and one has already developed, right? One has gone through the stage of maturation and puberty, all that kind of stuff, versus one hasn't, right? So we have to differentiate the way that these things look, but it's really hard to do that with the way that Instagram and social media and viral clips, all of that stuff is set up to say, I want to train like the older kids, right? Our youth athletes see that and they say, I want to train like that. And parents don't know any better. So I don't even blame the parents, right? But they see these videos and ultimately they just say, yeah, that looks good. That's what the pros are doing. That's what my kids should be doing, right? But ultimately we don't see behind the clip the hours and hours and hours that these professional and elite level college athletes have put in to be able to get to that point, right? And so that's another thing that we need to be able to be aware of, is not trying to train like the adults or higher level athletes. And the last thing we want to talk about is doing too much too soon. Mistake number 3, too much too soon. Okay, that's a big one, right? Because a lot of times, even when it comes to like training foundationally or having good foundations for our training, we can easily say, well, okay, even something good, if I throw it doesn't really matter what the training is. If I go from zero training to a massive amount of volume, a huge volume spike of training, even if it's quality foundational training, it's still going to have a huge effect on my kids because they're not used to it, right? So the kids that I'm working with are kids that you have your own athletes. Like, you guys need to think about the volume spikes, and we're trying to avoid sudden spikes, right? What we want is long, slow, consistent, progressive overload. That's what we're looking for. That is the name of the game. It's consistency, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to go train really hard for 2 months, and then when I go into season, I'm going to stop training completely. No, we need 365 days. If we're thinking 365 days, if I can train for 300 of those, being consistent, not necessarily saying every single one of those days, but within that 300-day window, thinking like, man, am I getting 3 days a week of training in? Whether it's very unstructured, just some kind of training so we can be consistent on the doses that the athletes are feeling, right? We don't want to have these massive volume spikes, especially like it happens in summertime a lot of times, because we kind of have our school that helps us have a little more rhythm, but then summertime comes and it's like I go play travel ball and I don't see any kind of development for 3+ months, and then I come back and expect to be able to stay in shape and stay consistent when I just skip 3 months of training. So we're trying to avoid too much too soon. We're trying to avoid the lie in our mind, right, that we're trying to go after short-term wins, right? We want to think long-term. We want to expand our mindset, not from I want my kid to be, or my athletes to be, the best 10U team or the best 11U team or the best 12U team. No, I want to think about, man, can I create a system where my athletes or my kids that I see or that I'm parenting, that I'm raising, can these kids have, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, have a healthy long-term career if they continue to play? And even if they don't continue to play, can they have a healthy relationship with sport? Can they have a healthy relationship with strength training and conditioning? And then ultimately, can they have a healthy relationship with the way that they view themselves through sport? What, right? And so we do that by thinking long-term, consistent, and being process-oriented, not being win-focused and win-oriented. What we want to look at is kind of the stages of development. And so what does it look like depending on where your athletes are at or where your kid is at? What do these stages of development look like? And so we can kind of think, we'll go over here. So we have stages / ages. Okay, and so, and remember, these are all rough numbers, right? A lot of it is going to be based more off biologically. How are they developing? What are their bodies doing as they're growing? When are they hitting puberty? Like, all that kind of stuff is also really like more minutia or detailed things that are going to be helpful in this process. But when we're thinking just kind of grand like overall structure, we can kind of think of ages, right? So the first age here, we have age 6 to 9. Right, and so this is the first stage. Like anything before 6 years old, in my opinion, the goal, like there are definitely things that you can be doing to help your child develop physically, but ultimately those things are going to be more geared less towards the athletic space, more towards your kid just being a human, just moving, learning how to, of course, early on, crawl, learning how to walk, learning how to run, learning how to have fun, learning enjoyment, learning how to swing, and learning how to hit things hard, and learning how to throw a stick at a tree, and all these different things. Like, those are going to just be your base level development things that ultimately I would view as just having fun as a kid. So we're not really talking anything before age of 6, because I think structured development before that age isn't really beneficial. The idea should be more creativity and fun and less structure. Then age 6 to 9, still highly creative, highly unstructured, but we can start to think a little more in terms of just like, if we have kids who, maybe you're running some camps for little kids, or maybe you have like, kids that come in 2 or 3 times a week, or maybe you're a parent who's like, man, I want to do some structured stuff with my little athlete, because I want them to feel like they're training and getting better, but I don't want, I'm not going to throw them under a back squat, right? And so what are some things we can do here? So we want to really think game oriented. So you think a lot of games, like how can we play, right? Like, even just basic games like tag and hide and go seek and capture the flag, and having ways to maybe even if you're in a confined space, can you add in some mats to like jump one foot to another foot? Can you add in rolling techniques can you add in the midst of these games? Maybe it's like a tag version with dodgeball where they're still getting to work on running and throwing and doing all these things. Can you work on throwing a target up and saying, hey, run to your right, jump off one foot and throw it and hit that target and see who can get the most points, right? We want to think game oriented, but as we're building these games, we want to think, can I build a wide range of movements? How many movements can I get in one game? That's kind of the way that I like to think about it, because the more movements I can add to games, the more that it's going to expose them to those certain types of movements. And so it's going to be a high benefit, right? So we're thinking games, we're thinking exploration, right? How much or how many different positions can I explore, right? If it's crawling, man, how can I crawl different ways, different directions? What does it look like for me to crawl on my hands and knees, on my hands and feet, versus maybe doing a crab walk, versus doing a side lateral bear walk, or whatever it might look like? What does that look like? Can I army crawl some? Can I do these different things? But ultimately, any of these movements, we still want to make sure we're making it fun, right? Training should always be, I would say in this range, training should always be geared towards fun and exploration, or just explore, right? So we want to be exploring, we want to be able to say, what are the things that I'm doing? And ultimately, kind of the name of the game here is, you could say movement literacy, or what I would actually reframe it, it's less about literacy. You're still learning how to do certain things, but I would actually say it's more just about movement library, right? So I kind of like this word here, library. It's going to be hard to see kind of because it's small, but can I build out the library, right? Even thinking about as a kid, you're growing up and you're reading and you're trying to say, man, how many books can I get over the summer? Similar to this, man, how many movements can I get in? How many things can I learn to do in different things, right? How much can I explore and can I do? Can I learn to go play baseball? Can I learn to go wakeboard? Can I learn to go skateboard? Can I learn to ride a bike? Can I learn to jump off trees and swing from trees and do some parkour stuff? Like, just creating a wide movement library is going to be really crucial and super helpful, not just from a physical development standpoint, but also from a cognitive standpoint. So stage 2, I'm getting a little bit long-winded, but hopefully you guys stick with me here. Stage 2, so we're thinking age 10 to 12. And so stage 2, this is where we can start to get into a little bit more, think fundamental weight room work. We still want to have an eye emphasis on fun. So still crucial piece, fun, right? We want athletes to be having fun. We want them to be enjoying what they're doing, right? We still are going to have a high, and with fun, I'm just going to put fun/game. So especially thinking like warm up, speed work, agility work, all that kind of stuff, we can build in or kind of trickle in technique work, but ultimately we want these things to be fun. And so we can find ways to have games, to have competitions, to make it exciting. We want kids to be like running in the door for training and excited about it. We don't want kids to think, oh, my parents are dropping me off at this stupid weight room and I'm going to go sit there and do this super structured thing that I don't really enjoy. I'm just going to go squat, right? Find ways to do the things you want to do, build movement patterns, but have fun at the same time. Then we want to think foundations here. That's not how you spell that. At the D, if you can't see that. So foundations, we want to think age 10, 12. This is where we can really start layering in foundational work. So beginning to learn how to squat, how to do a push-up, how to do a pull-up, how to do these different exercises. But we want to think low volume. We're not trying to crush kids with volume, especially when they don't know how to do things. And ultimately, a big piece that I want to think with foundations is, yes, all the movements are foundational, but ultimately we want to be able to think about the base concepts. So not even necessarily just movements, but what does it look like for me to have a stacked rib position? What does it look like to have core integrity? What does it look like for me to do a farmer's carry and really hold my posture? So postural things, core integrity, all these things and components are going to be really helpful, along with just foundational movement skills. So now we can start to work on, we had the library up here, and now we begin to build literacy here. So we have library, we have literacy, and this is going to be a really crucial stage, because this is a point where athletes also are gonna either fall in love with the weight room, or they're gonna fall out of love with the weight room based off how coaches or parents kind of view this, right? So we're viewing it as, once again, process oriented, of saying we're gonna go have fun, we're gonna go grow, we're gonna go develop, but ultimately we're not putting this high amount of pressure where if kids aren't doing things the right way that we're getting onto them, right? Because they don't know. They're trying to learn. So make sure you're doing a good job of being a teacher and a coach, not just asking kids to do some military regiment workout that they ultimately end up hating and either say they want to stop playing sports at this age or just start to begin to grow resentment towards sport and training. We want to grow a love for sport and training, a love for the process, not a hatred for it. And at the same time, we do understand that this is where we begin to talk about some mindset, right? But the way that we talk about mindset isn't by just saying, go do this thing. If you complain, I'm going to get pissed at you. I'm going to yell at you. I'm going to tell you to go run suicides. I'm going to tell you to do burpees. No, but this is where we actually coach a mindset, right? Be a coach, be an educator. Talk about, man, why is this hard for you? Why are you not focused? Why is it a struggle for you to show up every day? Because they're kids. Half of these kids are going to be all over the place because they're little boys, little girls who just want to go explore and do things. And so, once again, we have to explain why we're doing these things, but also I would say the mindset and the learning comes through being creative, having fun, playing these games, and then slowly teaching the mindset of what does it look like to become elite over time. What do we see when we think about the baseball players that are my favorite player? Like, what things do they exemplify? How can I show those things? And how can I ultimately, myself, model this to them so that they begin to learn what that looks like? Not just yell and scream about it, but ultimately not educate or teach any of the athletes on exactly what's going on or what we are hoping to see from them, right? So age 10 to 12 there. And then we can kind of think, number 3, we've got age 13 to 15. This can be kind of dependent. Once again, it's all kind of based off how kids are developing, but age 13 to 15. And so now we're continuing to think technique or literacy. So we have technique. We are beginning to explore the different concepts and really kind of maybe start to kind of get into a little bit more detail about what speed, agility look like and mechanics behind all that stuff. And then we're also starting to think about laying strength. So this is where we're kind of getting out of that stage of puberty, right? Kids start to develop. We often start to see even just their own movement competency, their own ability for their brains to function, the way they move their bodies, their cognitive skills start to develop. And ultimately, we kind of see them begin to maybe hopefully leave some of that awkward running skills and baby giraffe skills, all the things that they're doing, and they start to develop physically. And so in that phase is where we really want to think about laying strength, right? A strength foundation is going to be a huge piece for the rest of their development years and the rest of their career. If we can really think about getting a good layer of strength at this age and doing it in an appropriate way, realizing that a lot of their bone structures and things are still going to be developing. So, right, they're not just completely done when it comes to like growth plates or different things like that. And so realizing that and making sure we're still giving appropriate strength exercises, but knowing that ultimately, man, I can build a lot of strength without loading a barbell on someone's back or without doing exercises that might be a little more risky, at least early on, right? We want to build into that stuff, but I don't want to just say, okay, they're 13 years old, now we're going to throw them straight into a back squat, right? When they can't even goblet squat a 25 kilo kettlebell for 10 reps, right? So build the basics first. Stick to the basics, layer in strength with the basics, and then we continue to progress from there. And then lastly, we can kind of call for is age 16, and we're going to eventually we'll break 16 and we'll have another 5th stage. I'll talk more about that, but ultimately for this video, I just wanted to kind of get through the basics of the early years. And then from age 16, now we're kind of thinking we are training hard. We're learning how to train and be competitive. We're learning how to not just exemplify a base layer of strength, but we want to think now strength, power, right? So how can I utilize that strength? We want to think about more building of plyos, right? So we would have like jumps and landings up here in stage 3, maybe a little bit of plyometric work, but we really want to think about strength, power, ground contacts, stretch shortening cycles, speed, learning how to do all that stuff. And of course, we're layering in speed work into all this. It's always there, but here we're just going to be getting a little more specific with the outcomes that we're doing for that. Overview, we kind of have our stages of development that we just talked about, and we want to kind of end with a few key reminders. First one you see here, no skipping. When we begin this process, it's really easy, one, for parents to say, oh, I want to make sure my kid's getting the best, and so we kind of jump down to these more advanced training, but it's also easy for parents to allow their kids to persuade them to get into more of the high level training early. And so that is one thing that we want to be cognizant of. We want to be process oriented, and so remembering it's day by day, week by week, year by year, slow, consistent processes that will lead to elite athletes, right? Imagine that says elite, doesn't really look like it, but that will lead to elite athletes. It is not jumping and skipping steps. So that's one thing, right? Remembering that we want to also, a big piece of this, right, is that in the whole thing, you heard me talk about fun, but ultimately I would say in this entire thing, right, if I could say one overarching concept, right, we're going to put it right here, is joy, right? We want our athletes to experience joy through every stage, right? Joy of sport, joy of training, the joy of using their bodies, right? So we want them to be able to utilize training as a means to get better, as a means to grow, but not as a means for them to find validation or to be ultimately find their identity rooted in, right? So as we continue to build out this channel and this page, I hope you guys continue to come back. We're going to be talking a lot about what it looks like to develop and a lot of other training concepts. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope that you gained something from it. I hope that it helps you. If you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out, subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great day.